Hey, it's time for another edition of the Cseekly Recap. I'm your host Csomm, and this is a selection of news I have covered this week. The footage behind is from the game Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords. Let's get started with the first news of the week, which is all about Avowed 2. It seems Obsidian is working on Avowed 2 with a new director. And this is a very interesting news to me for various reasons, which I will disclose later. But I would take it with a healthy dose of caution, because none of this has been officially confirmed by Xbox or Obsidian. Most of it comes from comments by former Obsidian co-founder Chris Avellone. And the important thing here is that he no longer works at the studio, but apparently still has connections there. So why am I interested in this news? Well, I played the game, I made a review about it, and you can check it out if you wanna. But long story short, it was pretty shit. I could go on and on about what was bad in that game, but it's safe to say that Avowed wasn't a blockbuster on a level of Skyrim. And don't get me wrong, when we saw initial trailers and reveals and whatever they dished out, the game had amazing potential. Not to mention, it was Obsidian who was making the game, and we all know what happened with Fallout New Vegas. That is how legendary that game became. And it's still, to this day, one of the greatest RPGs ever made. So when you actually started playing the game, it seems like we were heavily, and I mean it, heavily catfished. Because the game looked nothing like the trailers. Or at least, it looked nothing like we thought. And there are many reasons for that. I think I also made a video about it, I don't really remember. More incentive for you guys to go through my channel and see what I was doing. But anyway, if you take a look how the game was developed under the previous leadership, new leadership may not be a bad thing. The new guy who's going to be the replacement has an excellent pedigree. He worked on Neverwinter Nights 2, Mask of the Betrayer, Dead State, Pillars of Eternity, and Tyranny. So if we take that as a reference point, Avowed 2 might lean more heavily into deep role-playing systems and stronger narrative design. However, considering what Avowed is now, that is what kind of turd we have in front of us, I am going to be extremely skeptical when it comes to this game. Because you know what they say, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I believed Obsidian once that the game is going to be a good game, so that ain't gonna happen anymore. It's only when I see proper gameplay and gameplay features properly fleshed out, only then would I consider to buy it. But then again, considering I'm doing this review bullshit, and this is me speaking as a reviewer, I am actually kinda curious to see if they can fix what was bad with the first game. And there were a lot of things that didn't work there, let me tell you that. Also, I worry that a sequel is the easy answer here. This may sound harsh, but I wonder if Avowed 2 is being made because Microsoft needs franchises rather than because there was an overwhelming demand for another game. Yeah, there was an overwhelming demand for another game from the Pillars universe, but I can say with 100% certainty, nobody wants what Avowed was in the form of Avowed 2. My bet would be that people want what Pillars of Eternity 1 and Pillars of Eternity 2 was. At least that's my view, because I played both of those games and they were pretty good. And then you have Avowed as a comparison to the older stuff, and oh my god, it's nowhere near good like the old stuff was. So I don't really know what's their angle here, but in the long run it doesn't matter. If they want to repeat history and make another shitty game, you know, by all means you can do that, nobody's stopping you. What I would do, however, is I would totally scrap Avowed to begin with. I would actually work hard for people to forget that game and focus making Pillars of Eternity 3. Because remember, sequels should exist because players overwhelmingly want more. Maybe the first game had incredible ideas that deserved expansion, or there's a passionate community demanding another entry. And I don't really see any of that with Avowed. The only time that I saw that people were saying that they cannot wait for Avowed 2, well, that was a very fringe minority. Probably people who don't know what a good game is, or people who have very low expectations. I mean, there's plenty of those, so what do I know? And if majority of people are saying the game is, you know, okay-ish, I think that is a weird foundation on which to build a franchise, especially when Microsoft is cutting costs and restructuring studios. Anyway, I will end this with two things. The first thing is that I think this reflects a bigger Xbox problem. Microsoft seems obsessed with manufacturing franchises instead of letting them emerge naturally. It kinda reminds me a bit of Ubisoft. But the point here is that not every game needs a sequel, and not every IP needs to be a trilogy. Sometimes a game comes out, receives a lukewarm response, and you basically move on. But instead, Xbox has spent years throwing money at projects, hoping one of them becomes the next Halo or Elder Scrolls. And meanwhile, some of their most interesting projects remain niche. The second thing that I would like to point out is I actually wonder if Obsidian's talents are being wasted here. Remember, this is the same studio that made Pentiment on a relatively tiny budget, and that game had more personality, artistic vision, and confidence than Avowed ever did. So in that sense, I would rather see, for example, Tyranny 2, a new isometric RPG, maybe some kind of a spiritual successor to New Vegas, or something completely original. And instead, we are getting something that many people already have forgotten. It's kinda interesting if I want to be cynical a bit, because this sounds less like Avowed was a success and deserves a sequel, and more like we spent years and millions creating this IP, so we have to keep going. And that is a sunk cost thinking. But I mean, okay, if Microsoft wants to burn money, by all means, do whatever you want. Just don't expect that people are going to flock to Avowed 2, unless you make it much, much better in comparison to what first Avowed was. Next news article is all about Bethesda and Elder Scrolls 6. And this time, our boy Todd says that they need to get it right. Now, this is one of those statements that sounds reassuring on the surface, but it also highlights the uneasy reality surrounding the Elder Scrolls 6. Todd Howard saying we need to get it right is absolutely true. The problem is that Bethesda has put itself in a position where getting it right isn't enough anymore. After 8 years of silence, expectations are, as far as I'm concerned, really, really high. But let's start with a good news. The fact that Howard says most of Bethesda Game Studios is now working on Elder Scrolls 6 suggests the game is finally in full production mode. And that's a significant thing because for years the project was effectively on the back burner while the studio focused on Starfield and its expansions. So if the majority of the studio is now dedicated to the Elder Scrolls 6, you could reasonably expect development is going to accelerate. However, what really stands out for me is Howard admitting he questions whether announcing the game in 2018 was the right decision. And to be honest, he's right to question it. That reveal trailer has become one of the strangest announcements in gaming history. I mean, when I saw it for the first time, I kinda expected that the game is gonna come out in at least, 4, maybe 5 years. But it turns out Bethesda essentially announced a game that barely existed at the time. There was no gameplay, no story details, no release window, and 8 years later, we still don't know anything about the game. Also, Todd saying just pretend we didn't announce it was kinda funny, but it also feels like an acknowledgement that the reveal was a mistake. I mean, imagine announcing a game and then disappearing for nearly a decade. Most studios would probably get absolutely roasted for that. But when I think about it, Bethesda is getting roasted, so I guess there's that as well. One thing I need to emphasize, this isn't just another Bethesda game. This is the sequel to The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, one of the most influential RPGs ever made. Skyrim has sold tens of millions of copies and has remained relevant for over a decade through mods, re-releases, and community support. So the challenge for Bethesda isn't making a good RPG. The challenge is making a sequel worthy of a game that has become a cultural phenomenon. And that's a much harder task, especially when you take into account what I call the Starfield factor. You see, whether Bethesda likes it or not, Starfield changed the whole conversation. When the game launched, I had high expectations for it, because obviously why wouldn't I? But then when I saw what the game is all about, its exploration systems, loading screens, repetitive procedural content, and lack of the seamless world design, it's fair to say that I was completely disappointed. And because of that, I no longer give Bethesda the benefit of the doubt automatically. Before Starfield, I kinda assumed Elder Scrolls 6 would be incredible. But after Starfield, there are several questions that were going through my head. For example, has Bethesda evolved enough? Can the creation engine still compete? Will exploration feel modern? Will NPCs and quests be more dynamic? And finally, and the most important question, has the studio learned from recent criticism? Those questions sort of existed on a certain scale a few years ago, but with Starfield, they have intensified. So based on this, the biggest risk isn't that the Elder Scrolls 6 will be bad. The biggest risk is that they're going to incorporate what they already produced in Starfield, make a slightly prettier version of Skyrim, and that's basically it. That's the fucking game. Now, I made a video about what would I like to see in the Elder Scrolls 6, but basically, these are the things that I expect from the game. Better combat, better animations, better NPC behavior, more reactive worlds, stronger storytelling, and less reliance on loading screens, which is basically what Starfield lacked to begin with. And if Bethesda delivers Skyrim 2, in the most literal sense, it's going to be outdated as fuck. Oh yeah, and let's not forget, no bugs at launch. I really want to play a game from start to finish that isn't going to have a game-breaking bug, or with me not dreading that something is going to happen and then my whole save is going to be tanked. Because that almost happened, and what's even funny, the same bug happened in Fallout 4. So from a certain point of view, it's a good thing because I found a fix, albeit almost barely, but at the same time, it shows you that they don't really give a shit about the stability of the game. And that's not me being mean, that's just a factual truth. Now, the fact that Microsoft and Bethesda continue to avoid showing the game tells me one thing. They know exactly how important the first gameplay reveal is. And if they are smart, they will probably emulate what we saw for the first time when Skyrim was announced. There are also talks about waiting until they can show the game, while saying it's coming soon. And I would argue that's a smart thing to do because nobody wants another situation where we are waiting another 5 years after seeing gameplay. So when Elder Scrolls 6 finally reappears, I expect Bethesda to have a much shorter marketing cycle than people think, and I would say that probably 1 to 2 years from reveal to launch is the right way to do it. Finally, I want to say one thing. Todd Howard is correct. Bethesda really needs to get this right. Not because Elder Scrolls is a beloved franchise or because Xbox needs exclusives. They need to make it right because the Elder Scrolls 6 has spent 8 years transforming from a highly anticipated RPG into a mythical game that exists mostly in people's imaginations. And the longer the wait continues, the harder it becomes to meet expectations. Also, after the mixed reaction to Starfield, Bethesda no longer has the luxury of saying, "Guys, just trust us." Now, they have to prove it. And the final news of this recap is all about Quantic Dream and Star Wars Eclipse. Quantic Dream Strike aims to save Star Wars Eclipse development. And I thought to myself, what the hell is Star Wars Eclipse? And if you are in the same boat as I am, well, let me tell you a story. So Star Wars Eclipse is one of the most ambitious Star Wars games currently in development, and also one of the most mysterious ones. It was announced back in December 2021, and 5 years later there is still no gameplay footage and no release date. The only thing that we have is this trailer that's running currently in the background. Anyway, unlike recent Star Wars action games, such as Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Eclipse is designed as a narrative-driven action-adventure with multiple playable characters and branching storylines. According to the official description, every major decision can change relationships, locations, battles, and even which characters survive. It seems that the game takes place during the High Republic era, which is roughly 200 years before Luke Skywalker and the Galactic Empire. That means that the Jedi Order is at its peak, the Republic controls much of the galaxy, the Outer Rim remains dangerous and politically unstable, and new factions and species play major roles instead of the familiar Empire versus Rebels conflict. Like I said before, very little has been officially confirmed, but Quantic Dream says players can expect multiple playable protagonists, branching narrative, action-adventure gameplay, choice-driven consequences, several endings, and more traditional gameplay than previous Quantic Dream games, while still emphasizing storyline. And by the way, if you don't know about Quantic Dream, that's the studio behind Detroit Become Human, Heavy Rain, and Beyond Two Souls. But anyway, since there has been no gameplay reveal, it's still unclear how much emphasis will be placed on combat, exploration, or RPG mechanics. So now that I've kinda painted a picture about this mysterious game, what the hell is Quantic Dream actually doing? Because again, since the reveal, there has been virtually no official updates, no gameplay has been shown, no release window has been announced, and multiple reports have described development as progressing very slowly. And now, in 2026, we have additional concerns regarding Quantic Dream. Reports indicate that Quantic Dream's parent company, NetEase, has been reassessing investments after the commercial failure of another Quantic Dream project. Although Quantic Dream has publicly stated that Star Wars Eclipse remains in development, multiple industry reports suggest the project is still years away and has faced staffing and production challenges. And if the reporting is accurate, this is a worrying sign, not just for Star Wars Eclipse, but for Quantic Dream as a studio. I mean, games get delayed all the time, especially ambitious AAA titles. That is kinda normal. What's more concerning here is a combination of several factors. Number one, the cancellation of another internal project that was apparently expected to help finance Eclipse. Number two would be reports of significant understaffing. Number three would be employees going on strike. And number four, allegations that management is asking people to work overtime despite having fewer developers. And when you think about all these things, to me that paints the picture of a studio trying to ship an extremely expensive game without having the resources needed to do it. Because if developers themselves are saying they need over 100 people just to realistically complete a project, there's a much bigger issue than missing a milestone. For starters, it seems that the financial situation might be the real problem. In other words, it was Spellcaster Chronicles that was reportedly expected to generate revenue that would help fund Eclipse. And if you know something about project management, AAA development works best when funding is stable from the start. If one project has to succeed in order to finance another project that's already in production, the studio becomes vulnerable. When that first project gets cancelled, suddenly the entire financial plan falls apart. So the strike doesn't sound like developers trying to kill the game. One developer said that the strike is not sabotage, it's an attempt to save the project. And that tells me morale has probably reached a point where employees believe the current trajectory simply isn't sustainable. Also, the Star Wars license raises the stakes. A Star Wars game isn't just another original IP. It comes with high licensing costs, expectations from fans, oversight from the IP holder, and enormous commercial expectations. I mean, me, speaking as a Star Wars fan, when I see something that has been in development for 5-6 years, and I haven't seen anything at this point, what the hell am I supposed to think about? Not to mention, I completely forgot about this game altogether because there was nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing from developers to point out what's happening. Not a single blog post, information of any kind, absolutely nothing. And obviously, everything increases pressure on everyone involved. Now, having said all of this, ironically, I'm less worried about delays than I'm about scope cuts. If management refuses to hire enough people but also refuses to dramatically reduce scope, developers often end up trying to achieve the impossible. And eventually, something has to give. Whether we are talking about features, polish, release date, or developer well-being. And none of these outcomes are ideal. So right now, I wouldn't say Star Wars Eclipse is doomed. Plenty of games have survived difficult development cycles, but this is probably the most concerning news I've heard about the project since it was announced. The combination of many factors such as cancelled funding source, reports of understaffing, overtime, labor strike, and claims that more than 100 additional developers are needed, well, that suggests the studio is facing structural problems rather than ordinary development delays. And if the reports are accurate, I think the healthiest outcome would actually be a major delay combined with additional investment and a realistic reassessment of the game's scope. I mean, easier said than done, right? But that's a far better path than pushing ahead with an overstretched team and hoping passion alone can compensate for a lack of resources. And don't forget, history has shown that strategy rarely ends well for either the developers or the players. And that's basically it when it comes to the news that I covered this week. Thanks very much for watching, and as always, I encourage you to leave comments. I read all of them, and I'm very happy to interact there with you guys. And also, if you enjoy this content, consider liking it and subscribing for more discussions like this. And that's it from me, until the next one.